Hey, Marcia here. The key to really having a successful bone health program is to first figure out the root causes. And I see that this piece is often missing from conventional medicine, and a lot of people just don't know, besides knowing what they may be, the importance of each one. So, what I decided to do is invite back my good friend and amazing physician, Dr. Kim Millman, to talk about this issue. And she did a program for my community where she did a master class really going into these root causes. I got so many people thanking me, and it really cleared the air, and they really understood the issues after that. So Dr. Millman is back, and what we're going to do, we're going to share that class that she did with you. But beforehand, I just want to welcome her. And Dr. Kim Millman is a physician. She has a thriving practice in California, and she specializes in osteoporosis and has been doing that for over 15 years. So she has a private practice, and then she started a couple of years ago that I co-teach an amazing program called Restore and Rebuild, 100 Days to Healthier Bones. And together we've been able to really help so many people. It's been so exciting. Welcome, Dr. Millman. So happy to have you here to share this important information.
I'm blessed to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And let's just, before we show this masterclass, just tell us why you picked. There are 4 certain root causes that you picked that you've seen in your practice have really made a big difference, and they're really game changers. So you want to just tell us before we watch this clip why they're so important?
Yeah, of course. So the 4 root causes are leaky gut and microbiome mastery, and then blood sugar regulation, hormones, and stress reduction. So, as we know, everything is tied to the gut, so we have to cover that. And it's so important to understand where you are with that. And then the hormones, I have seen tremendous improvements in women who get on hormones or even do gentle hormone support, where their bone breakdown markers improve dramatically, and even their DEXA scans improve dramatically. So that is something not to be overlooked. And a blood sugar, conventional doctors aren't really concerned unless a person has diabetes. And even pre-diabetes in a woman or a man who has pre-diabetes compared to one that doesn't, even with the same exact BMD scores, the fracture risk increases by 24%. So it's something not to ignore. And we know that stress is so pervasive and it is just silently dissolving your bones. And we have to do something about it because there's so many good stress reduction techniques and so many ways to measure it, and adaptogenic herbs that can help us with this. And it can help us in so many ways in our life. And all of these things can. And so we're really excited to just, shed the light on these and help people to understand how they can get better and optimize their bone health and their life.
I love this. And the sad thing is this is often overlooked, but not here, not here. So why doesn't everyone watch this incredible masterclass? And then it is video, but you don't need the video. So don't worry. You can, everything is, even if you aren't watching this on a platform that has the video, you'll still be able to understand everything. So watch this class and we will come back afterwards.
Let's get started with the Healthier Bones Masterclass. You might wonder, what's possible for me if my bones get healthier? You must understand that the natural course of bone loss is for it to get worse unless you've done anything to reverse the root causes of bone loss. Also, if your DEXA scans stabilize, which means that they don't improve, but they don't get worse, then that is an improvement. The quality of your bones may improve without an improvement in your DEXA scan, and this still translates into a reduction in fracture risk. In a minority of my patients, they've seen a reversal of their bone loss to the extent of about 2 to 5% per year. And most of these patients are working on hormones and strength conditioning. And I can say that in over 15 years of my clinical practice, treating over 600 patients with bone loss that less than 1% have fractured or broken a bone. So what is involved in getting healthier bones? It is complicated. It absolutely has to include reversing root cause factors. It is multifactorial. It takes time, and it should be customized to you. So in this masterclass, I'm going to go through the 3 R's to healthier bones and how I can customize it to you. I'm going to be looking at a number of important topics, including the gut and microbiome mastery, hormone wealth, blood sugar stability, and stress resiliency. Bone is not a static structure, merely here to support your weight and your organs, but is a dynamic living tissue and is constantly remodeling, taking out microfractures from daily living. Your bone communicates with almost all of the organs and tissues in the body through hormones and cellular signaling. Your bones are the major mineral storage form for your body. And in times of mineral deficiency, your blood and your organs will keep the minerals at the expense of your bones. So literally, your bones give up their mineral first and they feed last. So this is the essential reason why you must address multifactorial root cause factors for your bone loss. I like to think of the process of having healthier bones as the 3R process, where we first reverse bone depleting factors that include inflammation, anti-nutrients, toxins, gut pathogens, elevated bone breakdown hormones like cortisol, thyroid and parathyroid, and reversing the fear of movement and feeling fragile that you might have. The second stage is to restore bone healing, repairing the gut wall, having restful sleep, having blood sugar stability and regular bowel movements, and stress resiliency, and restoring a sense of empowerment. The third stage is to rebuild strong, resilient bones by having bone building nutrients and being hormone rich, having good digestion, promoting a bone healthy microbiome, and having good body strength and balance, and rebuilding the confidence that you can rely on your bones to stay active and do the things you love. It's really important to understand that everyone is different, and you may have blood sugar stability issues and someone else doesn't. So it's absolutely important that you evaluate your unique needs. And I have my patients do this by evaluating symptom self-assessments, by looking at mainstream labs, and diving deeper with functional medicine labs, and prioritizing what's most important for you, because you don't want to be in a sense of overwhelm, doing too much, and your body wants to focus on just a few things at a time. So it's important to keep that in mind when you formulate a plan and a timeline. 2,500 years ago, Hippocrates said all disease begins in the gut, and I couldn't agree more. So I'd like to go over the 5 main factors that can cause an unhealthy gut and can contribute to bone loss. Because your bones lose their minerals in time of nutrient deficiencies and get fed last, anti-nutrients are especially harmful to your bones. These anti-nutrients may affect your vitamin and mineral status, may cause inflammation and toxicity, and can affect your hormones. These anti-nutrients include sugar, oxalates, inflammatory foods, foods with chemicals and dyes and glyphosate, and water with heavy metal contamination, and lead and cadmium are the most important for your bones. So what are oxalates and why are they so important? I would say that oxalates have been on my radar for the last 5 years, but only in the last couple of years have I really started to understand their importance. So oxalates are these tiny little crystals, and they attract positively charged minerals like calcium and magnesium that you need for your bones. They act like little tiny shards of glass, and they can lodge in any organ and any tissue, causing tissue destruction, pain, and inflammation. And one of the areas that can get affected most is the kidneys and the bladder and the ureters and the genital areas. So you may know that kidney stones are composed of calcium oxalate crystals, and a stone is usually a millimeter or more. But even if these tiny little crystals are very small, they can still abrade the tissue and cause oxalate toxicity. And so where are oxalates found in the foods that you eat? They're found in plants and nuts and seeds. And very high oxalate foods include spinach and chards, beets, and almonds. I know these are healthy foods that we love to eat, but if you're eating these foods every day, especially vegetarians are highly at risk, then you run the risk of having oxalate toxicity and depleting your minerals, depleting your mineral stores in your bones, and depleting your B vitamins, which your bones also need. Recently, I taught a program for people with bone loss, and I was teaching them about oxalate toxicity and how to replete your mineral status and your B vitamins with oxalate toxicity. And one of my program participants, she has chronic UTIs, and she was listening to some of the symptoms that a person could have, including pain and burning and irritability of the bladder and feeling like you have a chronic UTI. So sometimes she would go to her doctor and they would do a test, and she would have bacteria in her urine, and she would be given antibiotics and it would clear up. And then oftentimes she would also have the same symptoms. She would go to her doctor and there would be an absence of bacteria. So she was a little bit confused as to what was going on, and heard my discussion about oxalates and decided to take out the high oxalate foods from her diet and replete her minerals and her B vitamins. And what she found was these chronic UTI symptoms that she had had for many, many years started to subside. And she was, in fact, afraid that she was going to be on antibiotics off and on for the rest of her life. And she was very grateful to understand that it was potentially a part of her diet that she could control and felt empowered. So that she understood what the real root cause was of these chronic UTI symptoms. I also had a program participant who took out the high oxalate foods and also followed my protocol for repleting minerals and B vitamins, and she had 90% of her neck pain disappear. And another program participant had real heavy legs and sore muscles. She did the same thing, and those symptoms subsided. So it just goes to show how important oxalates can be and oxalate toxicities can be, and how I really don't think that it's a good idea to be having a spinach smoothie with almond milk in it every day, and how important it is for you to understand about oxalates and to evaluate them for your own as an anti-nutrient that could be causing problems for your own bones. So if you don't digest your food, you won't absorb the important vitamins and minerals and amino acids that you need for your bones to be as healthy as possible. So I prepared this chart for you showing the different kinds of nutrients over on the left and what happens if you don't absorb them to your skeleton on the right. So we all know that there are different minerals that are contained in your bones, including calcium, magnesium, potassium, and phosphorus. And boron is not contained in your bones, but it does help you to absorb calcium, magnesium, and vitamin D. So when you don't absorb these minerals, you can have a demineralized skeleton and bone stiffness. Also, you know that fat-soluble vitamins, including vitamins D, E, and K, are very important for your bones, including your mineral metabolism. And again, because they are so important to mineral metabolism, if you don't have good absorption of fats and fat-soluble vitamins, you can have a demineralized skeleton. The deficiencies of the B vitamins, especially B6, B12, and folate, can cause a condition that is a high level of homocysteine in your blood. And high homocysteine levels can cause bone stiffness. So B vitamins are very important for you to digest and absorb. And also the form is important. So high homocysteine levels can occur even though you're taking B vitamins, but you're not taking the active forms, and you potentially have a problem activating your B vitamins. So in that way, you may have to tweak your nutrient regimen to look at your homocysteine levels and make sure that you are getting the right ones for your bone health. And also the nutrients that are included in making collagen, which is part of the matrix that your minerals sit on. And so the important nutrients there are vitamin C, B6, proline, and lysine. And proline and lysine are 2 amino acids that you find in proteins. So you want to make sure that you have a protein-rich diet and that you're digesting your proteins adequately. And if you're not, you could have a lack of the protein matrix that your minerals need to mineralize, and you could have bone fragility. Taking digestive enzymes is one way that you can help to digest your foods so your bones get the nutrition that they need. So there are digestive enzymes that are needed for all of the macronutrients, including carbohydrates, fats, and protein. And so specific to proteins are proteases and pancreatin. Those are the things that break down your proteins. And if you don't have enough, you may not have enough protein for your bones' scaffolding matrix. Also, lipase and ox bile break down your fats, which are important for your fat-soluble vitamins. I find that many of my patients have problems digesting fats. And so what this might look like for you is that you might have gas and bloating, and there's a measure of your stool, a lab measure that you can look at called steatocrit. And steatocrit is literally the amount of fat that is in the stool. You should have none, because otherwise, if you have fat in your stool, it's malabsorption and you're not breaking down your fats. So when my patients have problems breaking down their fats, I recommend a product that is a digestive enzyme that has high levels of lipase in it called Lipo Gold. And often I find that my patients have less gas and bloating, and that their steatocrit markers go down. And I know that this is going to help their bones with the fat-soluble vitamins that they need. We also have digestive enzymes with specific proteases that can break down gluten and casein in dairy. And so many of my patients have problems with inflammation from gluten and dairy that these have become more and more important. So they can use these specific proteases as digestive enzymes when they're trying to transition off of these inflammatory foods, and also when they eat out. So I recommend that they take 1 to 2 capsules with their meals, and also take them along with them when they eat out, just in case they get inadvertently some gluten or dairy in their meal. Your gut wall protects you from invasion from gut pathogens, toxins, and undigested foods. So these pathogens can traverse the bacterial wall, and when they're seen by the immune system here, an immune reaction happens, and these antibodies can go into the bloodstream and cause something called systemic endotoxemia. Systemic endotoxemia is bad because it's inflammatory, and it can cause systemic symptoms anywhere in the body. Also, another problem is when undigested food particles can come and transverse. Now, the immune system is going to see this as being foreign because it's not a digested food particle, and the same thing can happen. Systemic endotoxemia can occur. Systemic endotoxemia can be reversed and accomplished by healing a leaky gut. And this includes removing and identifying the overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria that have breached the intestinal wall, by identifying and removing inflammatory foods for you, by making sure that you have optimal digestion, because then you've digested these fragments, and when they come through, the immune system doesn't see them as being foreign. And once this is accomplished, you can heal the gut lining with healing nutrients and herbs like marshmallow root and DGL, and L-glutamine. So what is your microbiome? It is 10 trillion organisms strong, and it's considered to be our second genome. We are understanding more and more about what our microbiome does for us. They produce nutrients like B vitamins and vitamin K, and they affect our neurotransmitters, so they affect our emotions and the likelihood that we would get different chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's disease. They influence how fast we age and how long we live. And so in essence, what do we want to do to get microbiome mastery? We want to kill the bad guys and multiply the good ones. So that overgrowth of colonic bacteria, in the colon, there is a double mucus layer, and it is harder for these colonic bacteria to breach the mucus layer that protects the gut wall. And as the overgrowth persists and gets more numerous, then these colonic bacteria can ascend up into the small intestine. The small intestine is easier to breach because there's only a single layer of mucus. And so the colonic bacteria invade there and they cause systemic endotoxemia more easily. And because there is a greater overgrowth and burden of these bacteria, the systemic inflammation and symptoms can be greater. And so we are leading into an exciting time now. We are finding that specific strains can help us to sleep better, can help our skin, and can help us to lose weight. And we are just on the cusp of understanding what specific bacterial strains may help us to grow bones to a greater extent. And we have these fermentation techniques now that can multiply these specific strains so that you can repopulate your small intestine and your colon with these superbugs. And these fermentation techniques include having the right temperature and long fermentation time, so you really multiply these superbugs for super bone health. When my female patients achieve modest reversals in bone loss, it is usually because they are supporting their hormones. And this makes perfect sense because we know that there is a negative bone balance that occurs when a woman has her first skip cycle. And bone loss is accelerated during the 4 years of the menopause transition. This is the 4 years that surrounds the cessation of menstruation and the start of menopause for a woman. And during this time, bone loss can be up to 1 to 2% of a woman's spinal BMD. And after the menopause transition period, bone loss slows to about 0.5% per year. Estrogen is the most important bone hormone for a woman, but its main role is not bone building like you might think. It is prevention of bone loss and prevention of bone resorption. Progesterone, in fact, is a woman's most important bone building hormone. Testosterone is also a bone building hormone for women, but it is less important than progesterone. And of course, testosterone is the main bone building hormone for a man. I'd like to show you how estrogen and progesterone occur in a woman's cycle and why we know that progesterone is the most important bone building hormone for a woman. So during a cycle, estrogen rises to its peak mid-cycle, and then it declines. And at this point, there is bone resorption. At the same time, there is a progesterone surge that counterbalances estrogen and helps with bone building so that there is not overall bone loss. If a woman has less progesterone than she needs, or the progesterone occurs over too short of a cycle, which is less than 14 days, this is what's called an ovulatory disturbance. If a woman has an ovulatory disturbance, it could be silent. So she could have a regular cycle and have an ovulatory disturbance. These ovulatory disturbances happen more often in perimenopause and when a person is not ovulating. So in a person who is having fertility issues, and a person who is dieting and on a low calorie diet and has excessive stress and may have chronic illness. In fact, a woman who has over 31% of her cycles with ovulatory disturbances can lose up to 1% of her spinal BMD per year. And over a 30 to 45 years of her menstrual cycle, this can account for up to 10 to 20% of her peak bone mass lost. This is important because many of my patients, when they get a diagnosis of osteoporosis, are very surprised at the degree to which their bone mass has decreased. And this is a reason why a patient who has ovulatory disturbances could be losing so much bone. And it may be a reason or a root cause for your particular situation. Hormone therapy absolutely requires informed decisions, and this must include the overall and the individual risks for the therapy that's considered. So an individual risk might include the family history of breast, uterine, and ovarian cancer, the age at menarche, and specific for bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, or BHRT, this would be an individual risk that would be in regards to the time at which a woman initiates hormones. So whether she is younger or older than 60, or whether it's been longer or less than 10 years since she stopped menstruating. So these individual risks need to be weighed and against the benefits that a woman may see. It's important to work with a practitioner who understands the therapeutic levels that are best for bone support and understands the overall and individual risks for a woman for different therapies. So the WHI data that was interpreted many decades ago that showed that there was increased risk of breast cancer for hormone users has been updated and reinterpreted. And it's very important for you to work with a practitioner who understands this and the new data that has come out. It's also important for you to analyze whether you want to be aggressive or conservative in your hormone support, whether you want to do BHRT or whether it's better for you to do a botanical like maca or support DHEA, or to take something like boron that can be estrogenic. I wanted to tell you about a program participant who, after learning that their best therapeutic levels of estradiol for bone support, she realized that her estradiol was low. And so she had her practitioner increase her estradiol dose. And after that, her estradiol improved. And she saw a bone resorption marker called C-telopeptide go down. And this indicates that estrogen is very important for preventing bone loss or bone resorption. Blood sugar stability is also incredibly important for your bones. And we know that because diabetics and even people with prediabetes and insulin resistance have higher fracture rates. In fact, type 1 diabetics are almost at 5 times increased risk of having a hip fracture compared to people without diabetes with the same bone mineral density. And for non-vertebral fractures, the risk is 1.3 times higher. And in fact, even having prediabetes has increased risk for fractures. So a person who has an A1C of 5.7 to 6.4, which indicates prediabetes, is at a 24% increased risk of fracture than people who have an A1C below 5.7. We know that glucose spikes are worse than flatter glucose curves. But why is that? What do these glucose spikes do to the body? We know they cause free radical damage and oxidative stress. It can cause damage to your blood vessels and causes inflammation anywhere in the body. And when the sugar attaches to protein, it causes something called glycation, and specifically advanced glycation end product, or AGEs. And as these AGEs, these aged proteins are in your body, it causes you to age faster and have more likelihood of having an age-related illness. It's important to understand that the sugar gets stored in our fat and our muscle and our liver tissues, and this causes metabolic inflexibility, which causes weight gain and also weight loss resistance. I'm a big fan of continuous blood glucose monitors. And the reason being is that you've got real-time data with what foods you eat and what glucose spikes result in that food, in different food timing, in what your physical activity does to your glucose spikes, whether you have glucose lows during the middle of the night that is affecting your sleep, and what stress does to your glucose. So there are many ways of dampening these glucose spikes, and one of the most important is food combining. So I've been telling my patients for decades, don't eat carbohydrates by themselves. Make sure to eat fat, fiber, and proteins with your carbohydrates, because that's going to dampen out your glucose spikes. And so continuous blood glucose monitors can show you how much your glucose spike is, and when you do food combining, how much it decreases your glucose spike. So what you would do is you would take a baseline before you eat, and then you would eat that particular food. Let's say that that's an apple, and 30 minutes you would recheck your glucose again. And then at every 15-minute interval, you would recheck it, and you would want to find the peak of your glucose. Your spike is your peak minus your baseline. So let's take an example. You eat an apple, and at 60 minutes, you find a peak that is 150. So your glucose spike is 150 minus 100, and that is a glucose spike of 50. And we don't want your glucose spikes to go over 30. So you would want to find some sort of food combining or other strategy for lowering your glucose spike so that you could eat apples safely without raising your insulin and causing insulin resistance. One of the other things that I always tell my patients is don't eat a carbohydrate-rich breakfast, because then you start your day on a blood sugar roller coaster. So what you would want to do is, let's say that you have oatmeal for breakfast. I tell patients maybe add a little bit of chicken apple sausage or some turkey bacon with their oatmeal, and this is going to flatten the glucose spike. You don't want to have bread and butter or toast and butter with orange juice. This is going to do the same thing. So again, have a little bit of a hard-boiled egg with your toast, and make sure to have enough protein, fat, and fiber in your breakfast so that you dampen these glucose spikes. I was actually really impressed by this data. I knew that food order made a difference, and I knew that eating carbohydrates last was important, but I didn't know how dramatic your glucose spikes could reduce by employing food order. So there was a study done in 2015, and the carbohydrate in the meal was ciabatta bread with orange juice, and the protein was skinless chicken breast. And then they had a salad with broccoli and butter. And what they did was they measured the glucose spikes and the insulin levels at 30, 60, and 120 minutes after baseline. And what they found, I thought, was quite remarkable. And you can see that, let's look at the 60-minute data. When the study participants had carbohydrates first, at 60 minutes, they had 199 blood glucose. And when they ate carbohydrates last, that reduced down to 125. So this is a 37% change in their blood glucose spike by just employing food order and eating carbohydrates last. When you look at the blood insulin spike, you see an even more dramatic effect. So at 60 minutes, their blood insulin was 125. And this was when they had carbohydrates first. When they ate carbohydrates last, it reduced down to 63. This was almost a 50% change in their blood insulin. So this is going to do a lot to, if a person has insulin resistance, to reduce the insulin levels and to desensitize the receptors Remember that insulin is inflammatory, and so insulin resistance is a risk factor for bone loss and for fractures. So this is something that is well worth your investigation, and you can do food combining and food order even without a CBGM. So other strategies to lower your glucose spikes, including maybe taking a 10-minute walk after you have your food, making sure that you are taking a breath before you eat and not working while you eat, because stress increases your blood glucose. So as you're eating your meal, take a breath, be grateful for your food and your family. I think this is one of the reasons why saying grace is really important, physiologically and emotionally and mentally. And also, if you have a high carbohydrate meal, you could have a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar diluted in some water, and you take that 10 to 15 to 20 minutes before you have your meal, and that's going to decrease your blood glucose spike. You also want to be able to find your kryptonite foods, and you would be able to do this with a CBGM. So you might find that even if you put some cashew butter or some cinnamon on your apple slices, that you still can't reduce your blood glucose spike lower than 30 points. So for the time being, an apple is one of your kryptonite foods, even though it's very healthy. So you would take this out of your diet for, I would say, 3 to 6 to 9 months until your insulin receptors sensitize again. And then you can think about bringing that back into your foods and seeing whether or not it's a kryptonite food again. So I've had several of my patients who have employed food order, and I had one patient, she was having a hard time with weight gain and a lot of belly fat. And so she did a CBGM and she employed some of these strategies, and she lost 10 pounds in a couple of months, and she actually lost primarily belly fat. And one of the program participants in my program, she went from pre-diabetic to optimal glucose. We know that chronic stress causes high cortisol, and this is a strong bone breakdown signal. But how does it do so in the body? So cortisol breaks down your fat and protein to use as fuel. It increases the production of glucose, because remember, cortisol is increasing your sympathetic tone, and your sympathetic tone is important for fight or flight, running from a tiger, in which you want your muscles to be engaged. So you want to have a lot of fuel in the form of fat and protein and glucose. And you want to have a high heart rate and be having good lung function. And so it increases adrenaline to increase your heart rate. It unfortunately redistributes fat to your belly. It is anti-inflammatory. We know that because prednisone is an anti-inflammatory, which is a synthetic version of our cortisol, and it decreases our immune function. And we know that from prednisone as well. It increases insulin resistance because of the fact that it increases glucose, and it interferes with the conversion of your inactive to active thyroid hormone. It breaks down bone, and it increases your hair falling out. High cortisol is a bone robber. The graph on the right is a cortisol curve of a patient of mine that is taken in saliva at different parts during the day. So the optimal curve should be right in between the two black dots within the gray area. So here in the middle, and then rising at 30 minutes, and then coming down at 60 minutes, coming down to a low point in the afternoon, and to the lowest at night. So for this particular patient, she is coming from a low point and rises dramatically and stays high instead of going down. And she actually has an increased cortisol throughout this part of her curve. So during this time, she could feel anxious and restless and irritable. And then she has a precipitous drop from her 60-minute waking down into her afternoon. And because of such a dramatic drop, she might be feeling tired during the afternoon. And then her nighttime cortisol is on the upper end of normal. And so she might be having problems sleeping or having insomnia. This part of the high cortisol curve shows that this patient is in a high sympathetic dominant state. And I know that I have to do something about this state so that she can get into a healing parasympathetic state so she can start to reverse her bone loss. So a person that has this kind of cortisol curve might be having joint and muscle pains. And because their cortisol is high, their glucose is high, and that can cause sugar cravings. And when you're running from a tiger in a sympathetic state, you don't want to be having sex. So they have low libido. And because you're not in a parasympathetic state that is enhancing digestion, they can have digestive issues and, of course, bone loss. Your normal circadian rhythm should look like this. You should have high melatonin at night and lower cortisol. And so when I have a patient who has high cortisol or even normal high cortisol at night and can't sleep, I give calming adaptogenic nutrients like lemon balm, chamomile, ashwagandha, passion flower, and phosphatidylserine. And if that patient starts to sleep better at night, I know that I put them into a more parasympathetic healing state. And then what I find is that there's a carryover effect. So even though I'm just giving calming nutrients at night, I tend to see that my patients are less irritable and less anxious during the day. And I know that that parasympathetic state is healing for their body and for their bones. So what happens when you've had high cortisol for a long period of time is you can develop what's called cortisol resistance. And this is when the high cortisol levels are talking to the brain and the brain starts shutting down the production of cortisol through the adrenals. So this is through the hypothalamic pituitary axis. And this is called the HPA axis, and it becomes dysfunctional. So the APA axis stops sending a signal called ACTH to the adrenals, and the adrenals stop making cortisol. It's not really that the adrenals are fatigued and can't make cortisol. It is the HPA dysfunction that is causing the adrenals not to make cortisol. And so a person like this could have a cortisol curve that looks a lot like this, that is pretty much flatlined. They do not have a rise and fall in their salivary cortisol from awakening to 60 minutes after awakening. And so this is an indication of HPA dysfunction. This absolutely causes a lack of stress resiliency. And a person might feel very fatigued, maybe diagnosed with chronic fatigue. They can have a lot of, because they don't have a check on their inflammation, they can have high inflammatory states and have high fibromyalgia and autoimmune disease, and they can have a weakened immune system. And this health picture is not good for the body, and it's not good for the bones. So I hope that I've shown you that having gut and microbiome mastery, hormone wealth, blood sugar stability, and stress resiliency can be the keys to having healthier bones in this Healthier Bones Masterclass. Thank you for attending.
Wow, Dr. Millman, that was fabulous. And I think that just shows everyone how important we cannot overlook these root causes. And the good thing is both of us have had such amazing results, and we've seen people really thriving and really taking this osteoporosis diagnosis, which is scary, and being empowered and not only improving their bones, but they're really our whole health. So it's just ends up being such a win-win with this approach. But what I want you to do is tell people how they can get in touch with you or learn more because there aren't many. Unfortunately, we want 100 of you, but there aren't. But you've been doing so many things to get your message out there and really help spread this information to more people.
Yeah, well, I do have a private practice in California, and I do accept one-on-one patients to in California. I do have quite a long wait list at this point. So that's one option, and you can always call the Millman Clinic at 408-218-9301 and talk to Lauren about how you can get on our schedule. And I'm really excited that I have this 14-week program called Restore and Rebuild 100 Days to Healthier Bones that goes through the how to do the lab testing for these root cause factors, and then how to interpret those lab tests, and then how time tested protocols that help you to mitigate the risk factors. And I've found that people are really actually doing the work and are being super proactive. They are learning how to do it on their own. They're learning how to do it with their doctors, and they are really telling us that they're getting fabulous results. So this is another option, and so you can find out more about Restore and Rebuild at themillmanclinic.com/R&R. And we have a special offer for Margie's community, which is $100 coupon, which you can get at Happy Bones F25, and that will give you $100 off of Restore and Rebuild, and I really hope you'll join us.
I have to let's just give them a little history about Restore and Rebuild. So after I think it might have been my first summit, because Dr. Millman and I have known each other for quite a long time. But it was really frustrating to me where everybody was so excited about this integrative approach, but who should they see? And there just aren't people like you, Dr. Millman, all over the country that they could go to really understand this approach and who've had the experience and who know what work, etc. So I had said, Dr. Millman, why don't you create an online program where people can, because I so believe that knowledge is power. And if people could understand what the different tests mean, then they could work with their doctors, their practitioners, or they just have the information that they could move forward on their own care. And so, in typical Dr. Millman fashion, I have to say, because you don't just do things like, you created the most amazing complete program. So all of a sudden one day you're like, oh, by the way, would you want to join me and do some part of the class? And I'm like, oh my goodness. And anyway, it would so far exceeded my expectations, this program. It is just incredible. And now how many classes has it been now? Four?
We've had 4 cohorts, and we've had 600 people.
Yeah, so many people from my community have gone to it, and it's just incredible. I've never had so many people thank me for recommending something or being part of it, and what I also love, it's community. Everybody's working together, and everybody is becoming knowledgeable, and it's just been so wonderful, and I'm just so grateful that you did it and that I'm a part of it, and really can't say enough wonderful things. But the good news is you're having another cohort starting in August. So if you want to learn more, the link is in the show notes, and Dr. Millman just gave that to you. So that's one thing that's just so exciting. And I think the best part is we get so many testimonials from people just thanking them because they were so afraid. They didn't know what to do. They didn't have a course for, they really didn't have a plan. And this provided that for them. And now they understand so they can make informed decisions. And I think that's what's most confusing when you just don't understand everything. You don't know what to do, and there's nothing worse. Anyway, and people are getting stronger and healthier and reducing their stress, so all good. So that's one thing. And then Dr. Millman and I decided to do something. Actually, it was your idea this time. I have to say, the the class was my idea. Why don't you do this class? But why don't you share your idea? Because we realized, people ask me all the time, do I work with people one-on-one? And they, there's just people need more help. We have a whole, everybody wants people to work with, but unfortunately, there aren't enough practitioners. So if you're a practitioner, this is really exciting. Why don't you share, Dr. Milne? Because this was your idea.
Right. So, what was happening was that people were having incredible results just going through Restore and Rebuild. But a lot of people were just saying, well, I just need somebody to coach me along. I just need somebody for a little bit of extra support. And not everyone could come to California. And we didn't even have, even if somebody flew in from New Mexico or wherever, we still didn't have the space to see them. And so what we decided to do was, I would get these comments all the time. Dr. Millman, you're wonderful. But the problem is that now I'm comparing every physician I have to you, and I can't find anybody like you. I can't find anybody who will support me in the way that Restore and Rebuild supports people. And so, Dr. Millman, I would love if there were like 100 of you, but I live in a medical desert. And so, what we decided to do, I approached Margie because she'd be the perfect person to, help with this venture, is that we wanted to start training practitioners in this method. And so we're opening up a certification program. It's starting in August. We're really excited about it. It's a 6-month program. There are going to be content weeks and coaching weeks, and we want to just continue to support this community in a way that we haven't been able to. And this is we're so excited about it. And if you're a practitioner and this is a calling for you, we really want you to join us because we are so passionate about working with this community. And you can't believe the reward that you feel when you work with these ladies and men who are just, they're so grateful. And it just brings tears to my eyes to just even talk about this because it's so wonderful. And if you have this calling, we want to work with you, and we want you to, and we'll reach out to you, and we would love for you to get on our waiting list, and we'll talk with you one on one and tell you about the program. There's an application for it, and we need help. We need your help if you're a practitioner and you have a calling to do this kind of work.
Dr. Millman and I just decided that we can't do this alone. And both of us have people wanting to work with us. And because there's the need for this because we know it works. And so we thought the best thing we could do is really teach other people on we've both made so many done for yous and so many things that we want to share so that practitioners can go out and do this and really help more people. And so anyway, yeah, so we created the Bone Health Academy, which is going to be where this is housed. And people are going to be certified bone health integrative bone health practitioners, and it's really exciting. So anyway, stay tuned for more about this, but right now, if you want to get on the wait list, we have just go to tinyurl.com/TBHA waitlist, and that means the Bone Health Academy. So it's again tinyurl.com TBHA waitlist. And then, we'll get all the information for you. So this is just for practitioners because we really need people who have a background, who can be able to, have a baseline understanding of this work and our practitioners to help others. So anyway, yes, you can see we're both so excited about this. We've been working really, really hard trying to figure out how we can take all this amazing information and make it so it's easy for practitioners to then transmit it to other people and really pass it along. Anyway, so thank you. Anything else you want to say, Dr. Millman?
No, I'm just excited for the work that we're doing. I'm excited for, I wish that if you are a patient or somebody who's struggling with bone loss, that you'll come and learn with us over at Restore and Rebuild 100 Days to Healthier Bones. And I sure hope you'll join our team to really do this work in a really big way over at the Bone Health Academy.
Yeah, I can't wait because the more the merrier, and everybody has their special sauce that they're gonna add, and I just, you know, we're gonna look back, Dr. Millman, right? Just like with the course, it was just an idea. It was just an idea then, and now look what's happened. So many lives have changed, and when you presented this idea with me, it was like, absolutely, I am in because this can really make a difference. Anyway, on that note, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And all the links will be in the show notes. And hopefully, I'll see you on the next episode.